blank today is story. Your story matters. Each one of us has a unique journey, a personal narrative filled with experiences, trials, tests, joys, sorrows. And I want to emphasize that your story matters. The culmination of your entire life, each step of the way as it is built from the time that you can remember until today matters. It matters. Now we have a wide variety of stories present in the room. And I want to explore this, and I'm going to draw to your attention from one key passage and then later another in Mark chapter 5. And in Mark chapter 5, I'm going to read about 20 verses. So stay with me. I'm going to read several verses in Mark chapter 5. If you're turning there, I'll get there in just a second. If you're not, it'll be on screen. Mark chapter 5. I'm going to begin with verse 1. Then they came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, that's Jesus, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had often been bound with shackles and chains, and the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one could tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. And when he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and worshiped him. And he cried out with a loud voice and said, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you, by God, that you do not torment me." For he, Jesus, said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And he, the demon-possessed man with the demon's voice coming out, and he begged him earnestly that he would not send them out of the country. So now a large herd of swine was feeding there near the mountains. So all the demons begged him, Jesus, saying, "Send us to the swine that we may enter them." And at once Jesus gave them permission. Then the unclean spirits went out and entered the swine. There were about 2,000. And the herd ran violently down the steep place into the sea and drowned in the sea. For those who fed the swine fled, and they told it in the city and in the country, and they went out to see what it was that had happened. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting and clothed in his right mind, and they were afraid. And those who saw it told them how it happened to him who had been demon-possessed and about the swine. And they began to plead with him to depart from their region. And when he, Jesus, got into the boat, he who had been demon-possessed begged him that he might be with him. However, Jesus did not permit him, but said to him, watch this right here, "Go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he has had compassion on you." And he, the formerly demon-possessed man, departed and began to proclaim it in Decapolis, all that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. This text is why I'm taking a subject for you. Your story matters. This man has a radical, transformative story, and Jesus denies him the request to closely follow him in proximity and says, no, you're not going to come with me. What you're going to do is you're going to go back to where you're from, and you're going to tell all your friends and neighbors and family all the great things I've done for you. He's saying something that's hidden in plain sight to us through this man. Your story matters. What God has done in your life was never meant for you to keep it to yourself. It was meant for others. It was meant to impact them. It was meant to challenge them. It was meant to change them. Everything that God has done in your life is working itself up to this moment so that you can express it well to others. Others who are humble can hear it, receive of what God has done in your life, through your story and experience the change that you've experienced. That's the assignment of the believer on how to be salt and light. Now, we all have all kinds of different stories. So my mom's passed away, but she and I have very different stories. She wasn't really raised in church, and because of that, when she came to know Jesus, she raised me in church. But my mom's story is pretty radical. Not as radical as the demon-possessed man, but pretty radical nonetheless. Her conversion story, the way she came to Jesus, I've told, but it bears repeating. My mom was sitting in her little home, her rented home in Johnstown, a little town not far from here, reading her Bible and smoking weed. That's what she was doing. I call my mom's story, Johnstown, Jesus, and a joint. That's her story. My aunt and uncle, Mark and Mary, are younger than my mother. And before my mom gave her life to Jesus, she would go back home to her little hometown, and she would bring favors, if you will, to her sister and brother-in-law. She would bring pot back home. Just relax, just everybody take a breath in and then out, right? Okay, this is my mom's story. I'm gonna tell it. This is wild. She used to bring weed back home and supply the little village that she was a part of. And one day she went home after giving her life to Jesus, and my aunt and uncle had a custom that they wouldn't really pay attention to my mom, but they went for her purse because that's where the stash was. They would go straight to the purse. And this time when my mom went home, she hadn't told anyone yet, but her life had been changed and she gave up the drugs. And my uncle, I wasn't born yet, but my uncle went for the purse and he didn't find what he was looking for. And my aunt was like, hey, where's the weed? Let's go. Come on, let's go. And he's like, it's not there. And my aunt says, what do you mean it's not there? He says, it's not there. She said, what do you mean? She always brings something home. She said, it's not there, Mary. It's like, and so they're getting like mad at each other. And my uncle just blurts out, there's no weed. All that's in her purse is an effing Bible. It's like ticked, right? He's mad about it. My mom's life changed. And the old things she did were replaced with new things. Watch this. She used that as an occasion to tell my aunt and uncle what Jesus had done for her. Using this thing that had formerly connected them, she chose the transformative power of Jesus to be the placeholder, and she stepped in and told them over and over and over what Jesus had done in her life and how he had changed her. And in the course of time, my aunt and uncle gave their lives to Jesus. They got water baptized. They got connected with a good local church. Fast forward, they started a church many years ago in Florida and pastored it until the time that they retired, all starting with a story of what someone used to have in their purse but replaced it with Jesus. Your story is meant to be redemptive. Your story is meant to be transformative. Now, your story might not be radical and wild like my mom's. Like when I look at my mom's story and I look at mine, I'm like, mine feels kind of boring, to be honest with you. Like feeding the fish, tap on the glass and watch them swim around by comparison, right? Like just totally boring. But if we are not careful, we will discount the power of what God has done when we compare it to someone else's. And I want you to know is no matter what your story is, no matter how dramatic, no matter how drastic, no matter how far, no matter how crazy you were, how maybe normal and good you were, whatever, however you want to measure that, there's one thing that is certainly miraculous in all of us, and that is that God is the only one who has the power to transform a human heart, and that, by every measure, is a miracle no matter what your story is. Your story should contain it matters because it contains and reflects God's transformational power. Your story matters because it glorifies God. It says, hey, wait a minute, this isn't about me, this is about him. Your story matters because it helps to connect with other people. Let me tell you what I mean, and let me just step on some church brain toes for just a moment. If you're only interested in the Antichrist and what he looks like when he returns, you're going to have a very small lane of interest people that are in your world. If your only interest is medieval drawbridge architecture, you're going to have a very narrow influence with people. Jesus was so interested and interesting. Here's what I believe makes a person interesting is their interests, how wide and varied they are. Your story is always growing, always developing, always changing, and allows you, why? To allow you to connect with people and find out what's going on with them. Listen, if you want your story to matter, learn to listen and ask questions and find yourself in that story, and most importantly, how Jesus stepped into your life in your story and helped them come up to another level in their walk of faith. And this happens all day, everywhere, all the time. Everywhere we go, we're supposed to be salt and light. Our story is supposed to offer encouragement. Our story is a part of God's bigger plan. I want you to think of this for just a moment. In Mark chapter 5, it won't be on the screen. I'm going to finish with just a couple thoughts, and we're going to do whatever's next. The Bible says in verse 25 of Mark chapter 5, now a certain woman who had a flow of blood 12 years had suffered many things of many physicians. She'd spent all that she had and was nothing better, but rather grew worse. When she heard of Jesus, she came behind him in the crowd and touched his garment. For she said, if I may only touch the hem of his clothes, I will be made well. And immediately, the fountain of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of that affliction. You might have heard that story, you might not have, but this is the first account of a person being healed by touching Jesus' clothes. It's the first time it's ever happened in the history of the world. And that was her story. She had to have told others, or others heard of it. It was an amazing miracle that took place. Now, I'm not just guessing because it was incredible. I know because a chapter and a half later, in Mark chapter 6, verse 56, here's what your Bible says. Wherever he, Jesus, entered, into villages, cities, or the country, they laid the sick in the marketplace and begged him, watch this, that they might just touch the hem of his garment. And as many as are touched were healed. What happened? Her story was heard by others and realized, wait a minute, that woman's story shows me that I can get to Jesus and have redemptive power occur in my life by this method that I never knew was possible before. And so they hear the possibilities and they begin to follow that example. They begin to imitate that. They begin to follow that. And they begin to touch the hem of his garment. And multitudes are healed by a way that was never known to humanity until this woman revealed it with her story. That's what's so powerful about how Jesus works, that no matter what your story is, it is possible that someone has heard the gospel through many other people, but all of a sudden you tell your story and they realize, wait a minute, I didn't know that that's how it could work. Nobody told me that. And that's why we always must be vigilant to tell our story, because my story might not get through, but yours will. That when you tell them this, they're gonna say, wait a minute, whoa, nobody ever told me that that's all I have to do to get to Jesus. Nobody ever told me that that's all I have to do to experience his power. And this woman, through the story that she told, changed the world because she focused on what mattered most. Your story is a part of God's bigger plan, is what I'm trying to say to you. How do you tell your story well? Very quickly. Number one, pray for guidance. Number two, focus on Jesus. Focus on Jesus. He has to be the center. And when he's the center, you practice humility, which is authentic, which is who you are. It's more natural to do it your way than the way someone else has done it. Your story matters. Fourthly, be aware of your audience. Be mindful of the people you're speaking to and adjust your language and content accordingly. Don't change the core of the heart of the message, but do the hard work of saying a thing well because you know the people that you're speaking to. Not just saying it and treating it like a shotgun and maybe something will stick and hit the target. No. Pray for guidance. Focus on Jesus. Be authentic and tell your story the way it is to you, but know who you're talking to. Know the person. Know where they come from. Know what their life is like. Know their history to the best of your ability. Watch what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. He says this. Man, there's so much that I would want to go into, but for the sake of time, I'm going to not. For though I am free, he says, from all men, I've made myself a servant to all that I might win the more. And to the Jews I became as a Jew, that I might win Jews. To those who are under the law, as under the law, that I might win those who are under the law. To those who are without law, those who are heathens, rapscallions, wild, rascals. Watch this. Those who are without the law and wild, I became as without law, but watch, not being without law toward God and under law toward Christ. What's he saying? I go to the people that are wild and aren't doing it the way the Bible teaches it, and I connect with them by going where they are. I don't participate in what they participate in, but I'm able to connect because there's no wall of judgment and criticism and self-righteousness there, because you realize that the only thing that makes me different than someone who doesn't know Jesus is in fact Jesus. That's the only thing that's different. And I got there maybe a little bit ahead of them, and I can help them get further, not by judging and not by looking down at my nose at them, not by telling them. If you're talking to a believer who knows what the word says, you got to be sharp, you got to be crisp, you got to be direct in your tone. That's what Jesus does to the religious people. He shoots it straight. But those who are without, those who don't know Jesus, those who aren't professing him and living by this book, you got to be relaxed. You got to give a lot of room and give a lot of grace. Because here's what I understand, that God resists the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. I need grace, so I'm going to do my part to be humble and not act like I'm perfect. Can I tell you something that I wish, if today I had one prayer that could be answered, I don't think it would, because God doesn't control people, and this would require God to control people, and he doesn't do that. But if I could pray and have self-righteousness erased out of the minds and hearts of every believer, that would be my prayer, because self-righteousness is one of the most disgusting, despicable, non-God honoring elements that the believer lets in their life that actually contaminates us from being salt and light in the earth around us, because it says I'm better than you, when in fact you are not better than anyone. He made you better than yourself. That's what it means to be redeemed and be transformed and be changed. He did that. I didn't do that. He did that. I didn't change me. He changed me. And so, that I might win, verse 21 at the end of it, that I might win. I did all this, he says. Not so that I could be friends with them necessarily, but that I might win them who are without the law. Heaven is real and hell is real. And Paul's very aware of this, and he's saying, I'm doing whatever it takes to win those who are far from God back to their rightful place of right standing with the creator of heaven and earth. And I don't care what your opinion is about what they did or who I interact with, Paul says, I'm gonna do whatever it takes, because I'm more interested in winning them than I am gaining your favor and you having a right opinion about me. I don't have a need to be people pleasing. I have a need to be God honoring, and I'm gonna do whatever it takes to get the word out, is what he's saying. I'm doing whatever it takes. I'm doing whatever it takes. He goes on and he says this, to the weak I became as weak, that I might win the weak. I, Paul says, have become all things to all men, that I might by all means save some. Now, this I do for the gospel's sake, that I might be a partaker of it with you. with you. It's not just Paul doing it. He's inviting the whole body of believers to walk this walk. I'm inviting this whole body of believers that I can serve you to the best of my ability. Walk this walk. Walk it out, ladies and gentlemen. Live it out. Have the courage to live it out. I was at the grocery store this last week, and it got a little bit cold outside, and there's nothing that does my soul any better good than a hot bowl of homemade chili on a cold day with my own personal bag of Frito scoops. I mean, it just does something for me. I went to the grocery store and got the ingredients that I needed to make. And I went into that grocery store. Something happened. I saw people. You can say that a couple different ways. You can look around this room and you can see people. But that day I saw people. I saw them in a way that I don't remember seeing people before. I wouldn't say that I've been closed off to people, but I think it was just God elevating my eyesight, helping me to see even clearer. I saw people. And as I saw them, I began to ask myself the question, I wonder if they're okay in their marriage. I wonder how they're doing in their finances. If they have kids, I wonder how they're doing. I hope they're healthy, but maybe someone in their family is battling cancer. Maybe someone in their household is wanting to have a child and struggling. My whole view changed. I didn't just see people. I saw people. I don't know if I'm saying it well. I hope God helps you to hear what I'm trying to say. I didn't just see people, I saw people. And like I had compassion on them in a way that was growing for me. I'm like, God, who's gonna get them? Who's gonna get them? Who's gonna get them? We gotta get them. We have to get them. Why? Because heaven is real and hell is real. And ladies and gentlemen, if you believe that heaven and hell are realities, it will change your behavior, because you will not be content to just let people live their life and not do your very best to inject your story when it's invited in or when an opening is given. To be able to share your story is the difference between heaven and hell for some people. And I pray that before you leave here today, or as you're in this room, or as you're watching online, that you just begin to vibrate with the expectancy and the reality that we have got to see people and go serve people. Go serve people. The last verse, and I'm going to read a story to you that someone sent me. Are y'all doing okay? Let me find it for just a moment. It's Revelation chapter 12, 11. It says this. This is the punctuation. And they have conquered him. Verse 11. They have conquered him, the enemy, by two things. The blood of the Lamb and the word of their story. Testimony means story. Here's how we overcome, church. With the word. You overcome by the blood of the Lamb, the thing you could not do for yourself. But after receiving that sacrifice, you overcome to the secondfold by sharing the word of your story. Testimony is not just something you get up on a Sunday morning and testify to the church. That's one way. The testimony is your story. You being a living epistle everywhere you go. That's how you overcome, by the blood of the Lamb and the word of your story. Someone wrote me a story this week. They wrote me their story, and I asked them for permission to read it. Can you put that back up? I didn't finish the text. I want to finish it. And they have conquered him by the blood of the Lamb and the word of their testimony. Watch this. For they loved not their lives even unto death. Nothing mattered more. Life itself didn't matter by comparison to telling their story. And it physically cost them their lives. What does it cost you? Maybe embarrassment. Maybe pride. Maybe ego. Who cares? A dead man, a dead woman has no pride and has no ego. And we're supposed to be dead to our trespasses and alive to God. This story came, and it's a little bit lengthy, but I asked for permission, and I've also made it anonymous. So I've changed it so that I don't mention any names or genders on purpose for their privacy. Other than changing some of the pronouns, everything else is just as they've written it. Pastor Josh, first and foremost, I'm thankful for you and MLC. I prayed long and hard for God to lead us to a church that would be a good fit for our family. I've been carrying so many things, so much guilt and fear of judgment, because we've not had our children and we've not been in church as a family. It's always been important to me, but I felt I had been away for too long, but I was afraid, and so afraid, of judgment. I just kept praying, and every time I was always led here. My life has not been easy. I know there are many of you in the room who will say the same thing. Your life has not been easy. So first, know that you're not alone. My life has not been easy. I was raised in a church, but I was sent alone on the church bus and always sat alone, wishing my parents were here with me, but that never happened. My parents got divorced, and my dad died suddenly in an accident. His funeral was on my 16th birthday. My upbringing was awful. My spouse is my high school sweetheart. My household was so awful, I moved out the weekend I turned 18. I was a senior in high school. And I moved in with my high school sweetheart. We were so poor, but it was better than living in those conditions. Not long after I moved out, my mother was killed in a car accident. It wrecked my whole world. My oldest child was supposed to be with her that day in the car, but God had a different plan. More and more just kept happening to me. If I told you everything, this email would be so long you wouldn't want to even finish it. We've taken punch after punch. I felt defeated, sad, and depressed over life. At the beginning of the year, I started listening to the messages at the church. I have a 45-minute drive to work, and I was able to hear 2 messages a day. The messages really started speaking to my heart, and then my youngest started going to LifeWise Academy and really started working on me to get to go to church. I felt I could no longer put it off. They wanted to learn more, and it was my job to get them the spiritual nourishment their little heart desired. I want to read that again. They wanted to learn more, and it was my job. It was my job to get them the spiritual nourishment their little heart desired. I decided to go. That morning, I thought of every reason in the world not to come to church, but I couldn't go back on my word to my child, who was so excited to be there. As we got ready to leave, my spouse asked, "Where are you going?" I said, "To church." I don't think they believed me. The moment I walked into the church, I was greeted by Julie. I was so emotional just walking in. She was so incredibly nice to me. Everyone was incredibly nice. During worship, I did nothing but cry. Your message was like God was talking directly to me. Your friend, Pastor Josh from Boston, who spoke a few weeks ago, said something that really spoke to me. He said, "Your faith could be someone else's miracle." For me, the kindness and faith of MLC has been my family's miracle. I really feel that way. He spoke of steps. I'm trying so hard, and I don't understand it all, because you have to understand, my job has trained me to be one step ahead at all times. So it's hard for me to just take one step at a time, but I'm starting to understand. I believe for me, step 1 was walking into the church. Step 2, serving the homeless every Saturday morning with my church family and my child. I made a connection with this older gentleman that asked me for cookies the first time I met him, and I didn't have any. Well, the next week I brought him some. Now every week I bring him cookies. Well, a week ago, I gave him the cookies and something strange happened. He hugged me. Me, being the germ freak that I am, mentally freaked out. But I realized That was all he had to offer me, and I know it's making a difference. Step 3, my family said yes to Connect, and I'm so thankful for the people in that class. They're amazing. Everything we talked about are exactly things I needed to hear and understand that I'm not alone, especially after feeling alone for so long. Step 4, I decided to share my story with the group at our last evening of Connect. God was not letting me leave that room without sharing it. After I got my story out, I felt amazing. I'm so thankful. God knew I needed them. I've continued to pray for my spouse, and I just wanted Christ to speak directly to their heart. I wanted them to accept Jesus as their Savior, and I've been praying since we came for this to happen. And I could slowly see the Lord changing my spouse. Every service, every Connect class, changes were taking place. Then this past Sunday, during your prayer at the end, I peeked and I felt him raise his hand. They were ready to accept Jesus as their Savior, and we cried together. I feel I witnessed a miracle because immediately after the service, they went directly to Connect Central and they registered to be baptized. I just wanted to share this with you because listening to your words on my way to work, the kindness of the church, your daughter Audrey, your wife, every single person in that Connect class has been so kind. MLC has been a miracle for our family. I hated Sundays because I knew work came on Monday. There was never enough time. Now I love Sunday. My stress and anxiety are almost gone. I wanted to personally express my gratitude. I feel like God used this church family to save my life. I was so depressed, and now I have a whole new outlook on life. Just like we sing, He's not done with me yet, and I believe that.